Welcome to the 61st reading of my memoir, The Innocence of Guilt. I become a nanny in Knightsbridge. At the end of September, Brian moved into a small room in South Kensington. He wanted to be closer to me though, and he asked if I could get a private nanny job in the same area, and I knew I could. My career wasn't going anywhere. I never talked any more about helping unfortunate children. I simply existed from one day to the next. I didn't look forward to leaving little Darryl, but Nurse May had already discussed a foster home placement outside the village home or the transference to a cottage for him. He would be removed from my care very soon. But in the back of my mind, I had a plan to keep him in my life. I soon had an interview lined up in a luxurious ground floor mansion flat, complete with a uniformed resident porter in Knightsbridge, within walking distance of Harrods, not too far from where Brian lived. Mrs. Parker, an American, was very pleasant to me during my interview. There were 4 children in the family. I didn't meet Mr. Parker. He travelled a lot with his job and was out of the country at the time. My engagement ring was noticed. "Are you getting married any time soon?" she asked, in a tone which gave rise to doubts about hiring me. "Oh no, not for a long time," I answered, knowing full well I lied, as Brian and I planned to wed in late 1965. If we could save up enough money. If I could, that is. Impressed at what she offered me, I accepted the position. My own room, my own television set, a uniform, plus more money than I currently earned. I didn't fully comprehend the huge responsibility of caring for 4 rambunctious children. "You'll be treated just like one of the family," rang sweetly in my ears, and drowned out any reservations about what I was getting myself into. Armed with all my stuff, the accumulation of 2 years living away from home, I moved into my new place on November 5th, Guy Fawkes Day. No idea why this observance featured so prominently in my life, full of anticipation for my new job. Mrs. Parker told me she always cooked the evening meal, so my first time around the family table was a welcoming experience. The next day, the rules changed slightly. I cooked the children's supper and got them to bed, then waited to eat whatever Mrs. Parker made for herself, her husband, and me. She spent quite a time preparing the gourmet meal, and it wasn't ready until 8 o'clock. She plonked a plate of food on the kitchen table, along with a glass of wine, said nothing to me, went out the door, closed it behind her, and left me in the kitchen, while she sat outside in the dining room with her husband. I didn't know what to think. Have I done something wrong, that I'm banished to the kitchen like a naughty child? Tears filled my eyes, but I ate my food and waited for an explanation. After a while, the door opened. She came in with the dirty plates, dumped them into the sink, then served up dessert. "You can start clearing up when you've finished," she said, and went back out the door. Pots, pans, and dishes filled the sink, and it took me until 10 o'clock to get them all done. The routine from that day on, I realized she had lied to me. You don't shut a member of your family in the kitchen and shove the dirty dishes at them as if they are a maid or something. Nothing I could do, though. I wasn't going to force myself on them if they didn't want me near them. Too much pride. My job, after all, was to care for the children. 7-year-old Matthew, 5-year-old Anne, 4-year-old Susan, and 2-year-old Andrew. I lived with them in the nanny's quarters at the back of the large flat. I shared their bathroom. The boys shared one bedroom, and the girls another. The Parkers locked their bedroom door at night, shutting the children out. I'd wake up to the sound of one of the girls crying in the hallway for a mummy who refused to answer. As at Burwell Park Cottage, it didn't work for me to try to take the place of a child's mother, especially when the desired parent was on the other side of a bedroom door. In the morning, I'd try to impress on Mrs. Parker the importance of meeting her children's needs in this way, but she said that's what she paid me for. I found the children's demands stressful, especially in Anne's case. I couldn't warm up to this little girl with her stubborn, sensitive, awkward nature, throwing temper tantrums over trivial matters, unaware she was the epitome of the confused little girl tucked away in my grown-up body. My working days were long and tiring. I wasn't allowed a whole day off, but 2 half days instead, Thursdays and Sundays. When the children needed clothes, she hired a taxi and took me with her to a select shop, where they were fussed over like little celebrities and outfitted from top to toe by the staff. Balloons and sweets were handed out before we left. She also took me with her and the children to parties at people's posh homes, forced to stay out of sight in the kitchen while the party took place, only called if something needed cleaning up. 2 uniforms were issued to me, an ugly grey shapeless striped frock for every day, and a plain grey frock with white collar, cuffs, and frilly white apron, which gave me the appearance of a maid. The latter one being for parties or when guests came to the flat for dinner or cocktails. Then I opened the door for the guests, took their coats, and sometimes served the cocktails. On sunny days, I often packed up a picnic and took my charges to Hyde Park, where the nannies congregated. Many of the older ones, dressed in navy blue uniforms with matching hats, had been with their families since the first children were born. These unmarried women were dedicated to the families who hired them. Although quite often more true mothers to the children they raised than the biological mothers, they enjoyed no more than servant status in the family. I never wanted to live a life like theirs. I wanted my own family, not someone else's. A favourite place for me to take the children was Harrods, where a small zoo filled the top floor. It boasted a large tiger in a small cage, cruel treatment for a wild animal. Famous people could often be seen shopping there, film stars and other well-known celebrities, but never the Queen. When she did her shopping, Harrods closed to the public. You knew when she was inside the store with her entourage, though, by the fleet of black cars parked outside, uniformed chauffeurs standing beside them. In January 1965, after my 3rd Christmas in London without Brian, I wrote to Colonel Atkins to ask if I could be an auntie to Darryl. I said I loved him and missed him. My desire was to keep in touch with him by sending him birthday cards and visiting him regularly. I also mentioned my engagement, an upcoming wedding, hoping it would convince him to let me be a part of Darryl's life. My plan was for Brian and me to adopt Darryl as soon as we married. I hadn't mentioned it to Brian, but assumed he would go along with it, as he knew how much I loved the little boy. Unrealistic of me to imagine such a radical move on his part, and I hadn't twigged to the fact the child wasn't up for adoption anyway. Emotion fueled the concept, not common sense or any knowledge of the pitfalls associated with such a scheme. A very short and blunt letter came from Colonel Atkins in reply. His words crushed my hopes. He would not allow me to be an auntie to Darryl, as it could jeopardize his chance of a placement in a foster home outside Bernardo's. Something about bonding. I knew the concept. Conversations aplenty existed with girls at Bernardo's around our love for the babies, how we behaved like their real mothers. They always said the same thing. We had to love them and let them go. I didn't agree. How could a baby have too much love? And did they think that Darryl had forgotten mine because they decreed it? I couldn't fight the system, however, so I knew I'd lost him for good. Out of a little kindness, I was allowed one last visit. No more contact after that, or trouble. On a clear day in February, I arrived at the village home, located the cottage where I'd been told Darryl lived, and spotted him strapped in a pram outside on the pathway, looking for all the world as if he had been made ready for me to take him for a walk. I knocked on the cottage door to let the house mother know I'd arrived and received a cold reception. When I asked if I could take Darryl out of the pram and hold him, she firmly said, "You can go and see him, but don't take him out of the pram." Disappointed, I walked back down the pathway and said, "Hello, Darryl," and gave him a kiss. His little face lit up and he held his arms out, inviting me to pick him up, but I couldn't because the house mother watched from the window. I handed him a small toy I'd brought. He wasn't interested in it, though. He wanted me, his first mummy, or the only one he remembered. For half an hour, maybe more, I'm not sure, I stayed talking to him, kissing his little face, his little hands, giving him awkward hugs because of the stupid harness getting in the way, wishing I could hold him, all the time seeing the figure behind the cottage window staring out, as if to make sure I didn't run off with him. She'd probably been warned that I might attempt that. That's what I wanted to do, snatch him out of the pram and take off with him, but I knew I wouldn't get very far. I wanted to stay longer, but realized the futility of it. I only prolonged the agony for both of us. Nobody came out of the cottage to talk to me or ask me if I wanted a glass of water. A little scrap of comfort wouldn't have come amiss. Obviously, I was now on the outside, not to be trusted. Half an hour or so wasn't much for a farewell meant to last a lifetime, but any longer would have caused suspicion. So I gave him one last kiss and forced myself to leave. Walking slowly down the path towards the main gates, my legs weakened, and tears blurred my vision, but I didn't look back. Bernardo's struck me as so inhumane, their cruel, rigid rules, their lack of compassion, all summoned up revenge in my heart for what they'd done to Darryl and me. But rage soon died. Sadness took its place as my only companion. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading, and hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.